What happens when art stops being made by artists? When I was a kid and people would ask me what I wanted to do when I grew up, I would say, oh, probably something that has to do with art. There was never really an option outside of that in my mind. I think I'd be miserable pursuing anything else. My mother thought I would be a good author, but I wasn't confident enough in my ability as a writer to pursue that entirely on its own. It was an aspect of my talents, but I also had an extremely visual brain, and I had these characters and emotions that I had made up playing. I had an extremely visual, vibrant imagination, but I wasn't really good at like painting or sculpting, so I didn't really want to pursue anything that was like tactile art, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I had these two aspects. I had writing and I had my like artistic vision, and I knew that I needed to tell stories. Like that was a big part of who I was and what I wanted to do. Then one day when I was 12 years old, clicked. A revelation, you could say. Movies, films. It was creating a world. It was visual storytelling. It was everything I already did every day in my head. There are some artists who can't keep their concepts simple. Some creatives who can't help but make their characters have multi-season arcs or write only sci-fi pieces and feel the need to create worlds that are so elaborate and otherworldly that only an insane amount of CGI money could render them to be on the big screen. Looking at you, James Cameron. Anyway, it was embarrassing to admit, and it is still, but I think I am one of those people. My first show idea was a 4-season animated series about a girl my age who gets transported into a fantasy world. Well, not my current age. I came up with the idea when I was 12. So, it's got a pretty basic premise and uses a lot of tropes that I grew up on, but I think that the arcs and the characters and the themes are something that I'm really still passionate about to this day. And if I ever got the opportunity to make that show come to life, I think I would be satisfied. And I could go live in a cave and die peacefully. But unfortunately, we have come to an era that I think might be the death of film in the traditional sense of Hollywood studios. The industry is slowly collapsing, and here's my evidence. Number 1, media monopolies. Monopolies, why are they bad? According to Investopedia, monopolies contribute to market failure because they limit efficiency, innovation, and healthy competition. In an efficient market, prices are controlled by all players, and in the market, because supply and demand swing more towards equilibrium. I think this goes to a whole nother level when it comes to media conglomerates, because when you limit innovation and you limit competition, you limit creativity automatically. Like, think of how larger companies can swallow a smaller company and then take that company's brand identity and completely do away with it. It usually increases the volume of content. So, for example, when Disney absorbed Marvel and when Disney absorbed Lucasfilms, but it has decreased the quality of the content that they're pumping out because they're pumping it out at such a high volume. And we know this. It's not a secret. It's something that critics and film video essayists complain about pretty constantly. Think of the Disney takeover. Think of the HBO evolution, how Warner Bros. Discovery and HBO Max merged. They both had like pretty different brand identities. Discovery was more daytime television, reality TV, and HBO Max was more like hard-hitting dramas and documentaries and franchise films. So we used to not have this problem because of something called FinSci, Financial Interest Syndication Rule, and its sister ruling, the PTAR, Primetime Access Rule, which limited how much of their own programming networks could air on a given day. So they would like run each other's programming, and a lot of shows were licensed out to like different networks so that everyone kind of got a piece of the pie in a way. But the reason this law rule existed was to prevent networks from vertical integration and the formation of monopolies. But it was repealed in 1995, which cleared the path for just that. which was the rise of streaming enabling studios to find a direct pipeline to produce and distribute their own content via their own platform. This can lead to a lot of problems, specifically with the Warner Bros. Discovery. Warner Bros. Discovery is one company, sorry. The Warner Bros. Discovery HBO Max merger led to them first removing original content off of Max as a tax write-off, which other streamers, including Disney Plus and Paramount Plus, have now replicated. They also just straight up canned projects that would never are going to see the light of day, like Batgirl and numerous TV series, while conducting sweeping layoffs as well at the company. There's even a rumor that Paramount Plus and what is now Discovery Max might be merging, which is crazy. Like, no one asked for this. Everyone thinks it's a bad idea. Why are you doing this? It's not looking too good for us film and television workers. Another big issue within the industry that's kind of been around for a long time is the who you know of it all. I mean, nepotism exists in all industries, but I think it's fairly bad in film and television comparatively. Like, you'll have people that have never worked a job in their life and they're so-and-so's assistant now because, oh, that's like the niece or nephew of the producer of this film, you know, all that kind of stuff. And they don't actually want to do what they're doing, or they don't plan on moving up in the chain of command that exists in film. So it's just taking away jobs from people that actually want to pursue this as a career. Also, just like, it's really hard to get an in in general because everything's very location based. I'll go into it a little more later, or maybe I'll chop that part into this part. There's also diversity programs and internships, but the question is, do they actually work? And research has shown that the answer is not really. So according to this article, and this is just an example in terms of gender, but I'm sure there are other articles that can give examples of like racial divides and discrepancies and stuff. But basically, in television, film, and media programs, women typically make up 50% of graduates, but women are highest represented in picture editing, which is 18%, with other below-the-line crew members such as engineers, camera operators, audio technicians dropping steadily beyond that percentage. Women made up over 35% of programmers before 1984, and then it sharply dropped off into 18% in the following years, which this article says is because they were forced out after sound and picture were brought together. On top of that, in case you were living under a rock, you might not know, but there was a double strike this summer, a high strike summer. Many have said that maybe for certain people, it didn't go far enough. The actors are scared that the language used in terms of the AI section of the deal does not go far enough in protecting the actors' images and likenesses and stuff like that. And also the DGA deal. I was on Twitter when they ratified this deal, and there was a lot of discourse about it, but I could only find this one article on IndieWire that talks about how some directors, specifically writer-directors, are concerned about the language that is also in their deal around AI and the protections against it. Not only was the strike long and arduous for everyone, but a lot of people seem surprised that it was affecting not only actors and writers. Like, I guess people don't think about how if you don't have anyone to film, then there is no filming going on. If there's no one writing scripts to be filmed, then you can't actually do any filming. From July to November, there was pretty much no union production happening, which I'll explain a little bit more about non-union versus union. But basically, if you're going to star in like a big budget film, usually you're a union. As an actor, you know, you think of all of the actors that we can name off the top of our heads, they're all in the union. None of them were able to do any production during this time because they were striking, and if they did, they would have been labeled a scab and blacklisted, obviously. And they should have been striking because there were very important things in their deal that they needed to push for, and we support that. But all production workers were basically out of work, so production assistants, camera operators, sound, our hair and makeup, wardrobe, the list goes on and on. Hundreds of people, thousands of people out of work, basically, for months. And it was really hard. Yeah, and I think a lot of people have decided to leave the industry or gone into retirement because of last summer, or I should say the second half of last year. I mean, I survived on restaurant service. Yeah, most people got what they called strike jobs, where they were just working like a normal average job. Like my friend who's been working on sets for the past 3 years consistently until the strike, he ended up working at an AMC theater. One of my friends was working at like a cat boarding facility, which she enjoyed, but you know, yeah, it was really hard. It was really hard for a lot of people. But yeah, moving on. We've come to an era that I think might be the death of film in the traditional sense of Hollywood studios. And you as the viewer may be thinking, so what? We don't need them anyway. People will continue to make films, whether there are studios or not. And I would say yes and no. Individual people or content creators, they will try. But that doesn't mean that every content creator is a filmmaker, although many video essayists and the like are. And it's certainly not every filmmaker is a content creator. Many filmmakers are technicians, artisans, stylists, who all come together to make the art that is film. And as many content creators know, if you want to pump out things at a higher volume and higher quality, you usually have to add people to your team. You build your own crew, which is like a studio, but on a smaller scale. The difference is that many content creators are not setting out to make art or cinema. They're simply creating content for whatever niche that they're interested in or have been able to start a career in. So why not just fall back on the indie model? Well, indie films are usually easier to produce, and they do connect better with their audiences. I love indie films. I literally own an A24 shirt, and many of my favorite movies are indie films. However, the reason indie films exist is because people don't have the funding to get with like a bigger studio, or they have a story that is not in the niche of the big budget studio stories. And indie films lack the one thing needed usually to make them like a little bit better: money. Money can provide you with a bigger crew, better actors, a more perfect location, distribution, marketing money, so much more than that. There are so many indie films that go under the radar because they don't have the funding for a proper ad campaign. Not to mention, indie films are a very niche market for employment. Usually people go to work for them after they've worked for big budget studios because they can actually know what they want to do and they have the money to make it. It's hard to just start off in the industry making indie films unless you're doing it with little to no budget, which is always fun, don't get me wrong, but people need to make money. But who has this money? The big budget studios, that's who. Thus we've come a full circle on why this matters. I decided to go to film school when I graduated high school. The unfortunate thing about the film school I chose is that while it provided me with excellent hands-on experience, you can check out my senior thesis here if you're curious about what I made during that time, the institution that I was a part of didn't really have any meaningful connections in the entertainment industry. It was also not located in New York City, LA, or Atlanta, which are the three major production hubs where most production takes place in America. So upon graduating, I moved to New York City with absolutely zero connections. I lived there for a year and a half, and although I didn't make any huge progress towards my current goal of getting into big budget production work, I was really glad that I got to meet the people that I met and worked with. They're lifelong friends, and I even got to direct a short film while I was there. But when I decided to leave New York City and go to Atlanta, I had an idea that my film school friends who had already been there for a couple years would be able to get me in, you know? Because it's all about who you know in the industry. And I was right. I say all of this to say that everyone's creative path is different. But the path to becoming a filmmaker in Hollywood is very narrow, like very narrow. 99% of the time, you have to fit these specific criteria. I think I wrote 3 down right here. You have to live in LA, Atlanta, or New York City if you're American, Toronto or London if you're Canadian or British. You have to know people in the industry. This is the number one thing that you have to know. And you pretty much should be able to go financially without working in the industry for several months. So there will be times when you just can't find a project to work on, or there's just nothing happening. So you're just like sitting there twiddling your thumbs, or have a side job that you're doing so that you can, pay rent. But it is really hard to find jobs that are willing to let you work like 1 day a week. And then if you're working that job while simultaneously working a film job, then you're not gonna have any days off, which I can't survive like that. Some people can. Just personally not my move that I can make. And this is all if you're not in the union. If you're in a union, I think that you get a lot more opportunities and you feel a lot more secure because you know that you're going to get it paid like your dues, and you might even get like residuals and stuff. It depends on the position that you're going for or that you're in. But yeah, as a production assistant, which I'll explain a little more about what production assistant it means, that's really how it works. So is it worth it? That's something that me and my friends have started asking ourselves post-grad. Many of us thought that it wouldn't take too long before we really got to do what we wanted to do. But that was a very naive way of viewing the industry that we're in. According to nofilmschool.com, a production assistant, also known as a PA, is a member of the crew on a film or television show. They're an entry-level job on set reserved for people breaking into the industry. The job of a PA can differ based on specific needs of the set and the size of the production. And this is very true. Sets can have like hundreds of PAs, and they can also have 1 or 2, depending on how big the crew is and how many assistants they need for what they're shooting. So when I was working as a PA in Atlanta a few months last year before the strike happened, which halted all the work, I was on both non-union and union sets. In terms of the other crew members, all PAs are non-union, unfortunately. Typically, non-union sets are lower budget and union sets are bigger budgets. And yet, the only difference in how production assistants are treated is that on union sets, they can't go over 12 hours a day without consequences. So they have to pay meal penalties and stuff like that, which is within the contracts of the union workers. But there's no pay difference, really. Like, paid me $11 an hour for a big budget union thing, and the non-union set I was on paid me, I think, $15 an hour. And you may be thinking, that sounds really low. I was on an extremely popular franchise, like a show for an extremely popular franchise that has fallen from grace significantly, but is still squeezing out content. And $11 an hour is the lowest I've heard of a PA getting paid. But still, it's very much in the same range of what other companies are paying. I've never heard of a film television PA getting paid more than $20 an hour. Usually commercial PAs get that rate, but they have also recently unionized, and we haven't yet. So film and TV PAs are actually trying to organize right now. You can check out this Instagram page if you're interested in supporting that, or if you're just curious to learn more about why PAs need to unionize. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that if you're lowest person on your totem pole, which a PA is like the equivalent to an intern basically, is getting paid less than a Buc-ee's employee on what may be the next smash blockbuster hit, then it's pretty clear where your priorities are as a studio. They're not with the young creatives involved, and they're not with the future of your industry. Heck, if other departments didn't have unions to defend them, they probably wouldn't be much better off, to be honest. Also, did I mention that a normal workday on set is 12 hours and sets go into overtime regularly? So I have a friend who works on a set right now, and pretty much all the time she gets a pre-call, which is before the call time that everyone else usually comes in at. So she's like there early to run and get people breakfast and coffee and stuff like that, and do little tasks. So usually her work days are like 15 hours plus. On a good day, she works 12 hours, which is, I can't even, yeah. In conclusion, I could get into the nitty gritty of union deals and set protocol, but I was trying to give y'all a bird's eye view of some of the factors that I think will lead to the industry's downfall. Not to be all doom and gloom about it either. Like, I have my favorite shows, I have my favorite movies, but I fear that if I were to ever work on something that I actually was excited to work on and see like come to fruition, I would be too jaded from the experience of actually being on set to actually enjoy the finished product, which is really sad. Like, that is not the way it should be, but here we are. And the other sad thing is that it doesn't have to be this way. Taken out of this corporate capitalist hellscape context that we are currently in, making films is the most fun that anyone can ever have. You become family with the people you're making that movie with. You spend hours together getting all the details right so that everything seen on screen is perfectly placed exactly for a reason, and that reason is to tell that specific story. It's amazing. And like, stories, they change people, and the storytelling process itself changes people, and it should make them better, not worse. It's only because of the joy and privilege of being on good sets that I can see how detrimental it is to be on a bad one. And it can really crush your dreams as a young creative if you're only working on those bad sets. So my dream is to be a writer, director, or showrunner. I want to make things, and I want to have creative control of those things. I like seeing the big picture. I like seeing all the details come together. And that's really the job of the director and the job of the showrunner. I also love creating the concepts, so that's where the writing comes in. But in the meantime, I question how to keep going, and if I should be pursuing this route in the first place. Should I start and maintain a YouTube presence? Should I pour myself into screenwriting? Do either of these really add to my ultimate goal? Should I confine myself to those big 3 cities and subject myself to 14-hour work days as a PA in a dark studio where you don't see any sunlight, or outside in extreme weather, thanks climate change? Or is there an option that I'm not yet aware of that's better than those? I'm not really sure. I hope so. I don't think so, though. All I really know is that I have to keep finding ways to create, like I always have. So, welcome to the channel. I don't have good equipment, but hopefully I'll get some as we move forward. And yeah, I'm excited to get back to editing and stuff like that. In conclusion, where do we go from here? To be honest, I'm not really sure. All I know is that I'm not ready to give it up. I believe that we can still change the system. I believe that we can have livable wages and healthcare for everyone, even PAs. I believe we can have better working hours. I believe we can have less nepotistic hiring processes. I think I just made up that word. And I believe we can create diversity programs that actually work. And there are some that actually work. And all of this will lead to a happier set life. And happier set life brings a happier set wife. Okay, never mind. I'm done. I'm done now. I bid you farewell.